As is widely known, Singapore itself is a country that has achieved multicultural integration, rapid economic development, and technological industrial innovation within just a few decades. In your point of view, how was Singapore coordinated the synergistic development of culture, technology, the economy, and what are the key points?
Thank you so much for this question. So I myself experienced this miracle of Singapore. Singapore is known as economic miracle. So my first encounter in Singapore was back in 2012. And when I arrived there, I couldn't believe my eyes to what extent so small city in Southeast Asia could develop such a strong infrastructure for culture, for development, for technology. So, when the job opportunities arise several years later, I joined Singapore in 2021. And since that time, I'm leading arts management program at LaSalle University of the Arts, Singapore. And also now I'm the director of the Culture Futures Lab. So what strikes me about Singapore is about, yes, you're right, it's moving pretty fast. It's very fast and very catchy in terms of identifying bigger trends, identifying what works for Singapore, and building on that and bringing these things into Singapore. What also I really love about Singapore, how international it is. You mentioned yourself that it is a very multicultural environment. I think one of the biggest strengths of Singapore is bring all these nations together. And we are talking there about their super diversity. So, and it's not only the four representative cultures like Malay, Indian, Chinese. Chinese is, of course, is the dominant culture. But they also open for ideas that brought by expatriates. For example, myself, originally I'm from Russia, but I traveled the world and lived so many countries, including in Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific and Australia. So now I am in Singapore. And what really inspires me is that I can bring my creativity, I can bring my new ideas, and they will be supported in Singapore if they see the potential. So right now we live in a very high, speedy world of development of technologies. And of course, those small states or those countries who can identify the big trends and ride the wave, they will be far ahead in the future.
The second question, the 5th Creative 2030 International Forum held in China has set a theme as AI plus culture empowering sustainable development. In your opinion, in what aspects will artificial intelligence bring about fundamental transformations? How do we expect it to contribute to enhancing the well-being of all humanity? And how should we guard against its inevitable negative impacts?
So yeah, you're right. The artificial intelligence is actually transforming the way how we develop cultural practices, cultural activities, and how we look into the future and move into the future of our cultural development. And we just, at the forum, we mentioned already many things. AI is helping with heritage preservation. AI is helping with new ways of creative businesses. AI is helping to regenerate culture that was lost through generation. It can keep us with many things, right? But my major thing which I work with is mainly about, and I'm super excited, I'm pro-technologist, I'm an enthusiast in terms of new technologies, even though I understand it brings a lot of threats, and many people discuss different negative impacts of artificial intelligence on creativity and culture, but I'm very enthusiastic because in my field is more about developing AI systems that help us to understand the development of culture and help us to map, measure, and visualize the impacts, economic, cultural, political impacts of culture around the world. So I develop applications that use artificial intelligence and that use machine learning to actually, they help us to go through millions of data points to actually bring things together and ask questions we have never been able to ask before about the cultural development. For example, I was commissioned in 2024 by the Korea Foundation to develop the application that measures and maps the impact of creative industries of South Korea, Hallyu, or the Korean Wave, around the world. We collected more than 500 data sets to put them together into multi-layered mapping and created these tools that allows us to travel back in 30 years to understand how Hallyu spread around the world in different countries. Right now, with this tool that uses AI, machine learning, and helps us to bring all these data sets together into one program, we can ask questions like, for example, what is a cultural appeal? What kind of data can tell us about to what extent people living in particular countries would be pro or contra particular cultural products or services traveling to this country, right? Or what is the future of the Korean Wave? Where next it will travel? Because now we can use all these patterns in historical development for predictive analytics into the future. We can ask the question, so where the Hallyu would get the most appeal around the world? Or what kind of types of appeal exist? So I differentiate across national appeal, universal appeal, and then target appeal. So many exciting questions, and also the AI helps us to create clusters of countries, how they develop in times in terms of, for example, the reception and engagement with particular cultural products. So, of course, I'm very excited about all these things that are now happening with AI, and I think in the future we can only, harness all these potentials and to use it. We are talking here about sustainable development. One of the major pillars of sustainable development to understanding how we are moving into the future. Are we doing a good job? What is the cultural impact on societies, on economies, on political systems, right? So, what my work concerns exactly with that. And in my work, AI definitely is a great tool to move forward. Thank you.
Among the typical cases on protecting and promoting the diversity of cultural expressions in the digital environment in recent years, which cases with notable highlights, strong practicality, and high inspiration have left a deep impression on you? What suggestions do you have for the collection, evaluation, and subsequent promotion of these cases?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and actually touches upon my own personal development, because I worked for the International Fund of Cultural Diversity back in 2010 at UNESCO. And that was the time where I started my journey on the mission of supporting 2005 UNESCO Convention on Cultural Diversity. And I supported it through my volunteer work, through my research projects, through my engagements in different countries around the world, by trying to understand how we can support this diversity. So in response to a question, I developed the whole course for a module for university that is called Internationalizing Media Studies, where I provided all these cases to my students about this, how digital technologies could actually help to different cultural services and products stemming outside of the dominant systems to enter the global discourse and to enter the global conversations. So, of course, if we are looking at the bigger global cases, of course, we are talking about the Japanese anime, right? Of course, we are talking about the Hallyu and Korean Wave. Of course, we are talking about the Bollywood. Of course, we are talking about the Turkish telenovelas, Latin American telenovelas. So, of course, we are talking about even the African film industry, which is in Nollywood. So, these are the big flows that somehow ended up in this global informational media space and established themselves. And, of course, these were they capitalized on digital technologies, on different platforms that exist, and on many things. So, if you're talking about smaller cases, or arising from more cultural marginalized communities, I think right now we are facing a lot of new developments that are happening. One of the initiatives, for example, that I will be supporting in my role as UNESCO Chair in Cultural Analytics and AI in the next 4 years is a collaboration with Living International. This is a non-for-profit cultural organization from Cambodia. What they're actually doing for the 2 years already, they have developed a project on AI of our own. Imagine that. So very small marginalized indigenous communities come together and say, so our knowledge, our cultures are missing in the global platforms of AI. We need to, but we don't want just to give out our data. We don't want just to give out our history and culture and narratives and stories. We want to build something that serves our needs. So Living Arts International develops this collaboration. Right now, it's becoming even international because they collaborate with Africa, also engaging indigenous communities so they start developing AI, not with the technology. They start with developing communities, going into communities and understanding what kind of data could be actually transferred into the digital domain, and why would we have this data in this digital domain. If we have this data in the digital domain, what would happen next, and what kind of AI systems we could develop and design based on their community needs and communities understanding what technologies is and should be. So these are the smaller cases, but again, we are talking about cultural diversity and about technology. So yeah, again, I'm very enthusiastic about technologies and AI in particular.